Boris Johnson, after February 24th, he was amongst those first of high-rank politicians of the world to visit Kyiv. In less than a month after his appointment, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom Rishi Sunak comes to Kyiv, as you probably know. It very much looks like Ukraine is playing a key role in British politics, and obviously Britain's political establishment is at Ukraine's side quite firmly and adaptedly. My question is, why exactly? Or let me fine-tune my question to you as an expert. What is the driving force of the phenomenon? Of course, the war, but maybe something else.
I think that there's both an understanding amongst the elite that Ukraine is on the front lines, that Ukraine is effectively the border of the West, and that we do not want Ukraine to fall. That would be bad for us. That would be bad for NATO if Ukraine were to fall, and NATO would have a much longer border with Russia. So there's certainly support amongst the elite, and then amongst the general public. We just see the atrocities that the Russian soldiers are committing. We see how much the Ukrainian people are suffering, and we're very sympathetic to making sure that Ukraine has the ability to defend herself against bloody Russian aggression.
Thank you very much for your answer. Great Britain was the first to announce it's providing Ukraine with heavy armor, Challenger 2 tanks. And England is one of the first who talked about modern fighter jets for our military. Great Britain will start training Ukrainian pilots on F-16 already this summer. This was stated by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak during a press conference at the G7 summit. He emphasized that his country supports the defense of Ukraine and its righteous defense against criminal Russian aggression. Mr. Sunak also said that, I quote, "Ukraine's security is our security." Prime Minister welcomed, I quote again, "very tangible progress in providing further support achieved at the meeting of the leaders of the G7 countries, primarily the support of the US President Joseph Biden for an international coalition of countries to provide Ukraine with advanced fighter jets." The United Kingdom and the world look really united these days when it comes to Ukraine. The fact that President Zelensky stands side by side with his G7 allies sends a very clear and very direct signal to Russia and the world that the world is united around President Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian people and will continue to support him and his nation for as long as it might be necessary.
I want to pay tribute to my friend Vladimir. It was a privilege to welcome him to Chequers earlier this week, and I believe his attendance at this G7 was a moment of historic significance. The image of the G7 and our partners standing shoulder to shoulder with President Zelensky sends a powerful message about the unity and determination of the G7 allies. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, because their security is our security. The G7 strategy is clear. Our military, diplomatic and economic tools are all part of the Ukrainian counter-offensive. We're delivering more support on the battlefield through air defence, artillery, tanks and long-range missiles, which the UK was the first country to provide.
But it is not only heavy armour on the ground. Let us not forget the fire from the skies. Great Britain sends Storm Shadows for our Ukrainian army. Ben Wallace stated that the use of the Storm Shadow missiles will allow Ukraine to push back Russian forces from the sovereign territory of Ukraine. Moreover, and I consider it a very important sub-message that should not go unnoticed, according to Minister Wallace, the United Kingdom was evaluated and has evaluated the risk of escalation in connection with the transfer of Storm Shadow's missiles to Ukraine and knows exactly how to minimize it. With that much said, and with that much of help, is Great Britain not afraid that all this support might be coming a great deal at the cost of detriment of its own combat capability? What do you think as an expert?
So I think it's important to go and deter the enemy at the front. I don't think that going and saying we're going to let Vladimir Putin run over Ukraine and then run over Poland, and eventually when he comes to get us, then we'll go and defend ourselves. I think it's wonderful that we're able to stop the Russians in eastern Ukraine rather than waiting until they come on our shores. So in fact, by giving these missiles, by giving this technology to Ukraine, it allows them to take the fight to our mutual adversary. It actually benefits our security by arming Ukraine.
Well, a sub-question. Do you think that in the collective mind of, say, British society, any parallels with World War II are drawn? What I mean is, does British society feel that in Putin's Russia's face, in the Kremlin's face, Ukraine is fighting the enemy of the whole progressive world, and by supporting Ukraine, Britain does the same? Is that the case?
Yeah, I think there's a very large concern about Vladimir Putin's behavior. I think he's shown himself to be hostile to the West, to be hostile to Ukraine, to be hostile to the United States, to be hostile to British interests. And I think there's a tremendous amount of sympathy in the British people when they see the war crimes and the atrocities that the Russian military has committed. And they start to draw parallels and they say, look, we have sympathy for the Ukrainian people. We know how dangerous Putin is. It's time to go and stop him in Ukraine. They draw parallels to their resistance to the Nazis during the Second World War.